All right. Well, it's funny. I'm sure you've seen this clip of Fauci telling Rand Paul he doesn't know what he's talking about after Rand Paul says that Fauci lied about the funding for gain of function research through the NIH and the Wuhan lab. Now, Fauci says outright that this was not gain of function research. But if you notice, he never actually explains how it isn't. Now, I'm not a virologist, I'm not a biochemist, I'm not an expert in genetic manipulation. But when their own literature defines gain of function as being, among other things, applying selective pressure to a culture to increase transmissibility and virulence, considering the research at Wuhan, funded by the NIH, did exactly that and created a virus that can cross over from bat to human, how exactly is that not gain of function? I'm waiting for Fauci to explain it, but he hasn't. My best guess is perhaps Fauci is doing some wordplay here, because gain of function might only pertain to a culture in a petri dish that you have that you keep replicating or having it keep reproducing until you get the desired traits you want. And perhaps this research got those traits in a different way. I have no idea, I don't really know. But it's very suspect here that Fauci is saying what happened at Wuhan wasn't gain of function, when every definition I've read so far describes fairly accurately what they were trying and eventually succeeded in doing as being gain of function. So there's a disconnect there. Now, if this was the first instance ever of Fauci being caught up in a mess of BS, maybe some reasonable people would give him a pass, but if you smell smoke, usually there's fire. Because as we all know, this is far from the first time Fauci has been in hot water with nonsense like this. You can go back to the very beginning, where he said not only do masks not work, but there could be unintended consequences, and they might actually make things worse. With people fiddling around with the mask and touching their face and all this could actually cause things to get a lot more of a crisis. I thought that was a very good point, but to my knowledge, he never brought that concern up again. All of a sudden, everyone will behave perfectly and not touch their face or not touch their mask and not reuse it over and over, so no one will do that anymore for some reason, and this unintended consequence is no longer an issue. At that very point, being able to notice that, your suspicions should have been raised just a little bit. Then, of course, he comes out later and outright says he wasn't being truthful. He was just worried about healthcare workers being able to get a mask. All right, that's cool, but now I can't trust you. Now I know that you operate with an ulterior motive, and you'll say things you think are not true in order to influence something else behind the scenes. Now I know you're comfortable doing that, and therefore, every single word that comes out of your mouth, I have to take it with a grain of salt. Then, of course, when Texas and Mississippi lifted all restrictions and Fauci said this would be a disaster and it's a big mistake and they're inviting another surge, well, we all know now that that never happened. And then he went on the news and was essentially scratching his head and outright said he wasn't sure what happened there. He was confused as to how nothing really serious happened in those states. To my knowledge, it wasn't talked about again. He never came out after that and said, hey, here's where I got it wrong. He just went back to being sanctimonious. And meanwhile, if Texas and Mississippi had listened to him and maintained lockdown measures, it wouldn't have done anything except destroy the economy even further and reduce job opportunities even further and put major strain on everyone. And all of that, as I said, would have been done for nothing. So Fauci, if he had a spine, should have come back and said, hey, I'm not always right. Thank goodness Texas and Mississippi didn't listen to me. They made the right call. I was clearly wrong. I'll try and do better and not jump to conclusions so quickly. Now, if he had said something like that, I would have said, all right, fair enough. But of course, that didn't happen, which again tells me a little something about his character and, whether or not what he says is always true. And then there was the one with Rand Paul that happened just a couple months ago, the whole masking after being vaccinated debacle, and Fauci said he needs to wear the mask despite being vaccinated. It's necessary. And Fauci lashed out when Rand Paul said that this was just theatrics at this point. And then Fauci came out a few weeks after that and said, yeah, he didn't need to wear the mask and he didn't want to send the wrong message. So that's why he wore that mask. He just wanted to make sure, the PR was on point. The right message was going out to everyone. Okay, that is theatrics. That's doing something you don't need to do. And worse than that, influencing a nation that for some reason looks up to you into doing something and bickering over things that are not necessary. And you're doing this simply because of messaging and not because of the science. Okay, that, for someone in your position, is pure theatrics. It's almost the definition of it. So you're going to apologize to Rand Paul for lashing out at him? because of an accusation you claimed was ludicrous, despite a couple weeks later admitting that you were doing precisely what Rand Paul said you were doing. I mean, not for nothing, Rand Paul shouldn't wait around for that apology. And then, of course, Dr. Fauci claims no funding occurred to Wuhan for any gain-of-function research, despite fairly crystal clear evidence that it did, namely scientists in the lab specifically naming the NIH and Fauci himself for the grant they received to do this gain-of-function research. And if you remember the emails he was a part of where people were worried they had something to do with this gain-of-function research, that should tell you something too. It should at least cast a great deal of doubt over how much you can trust Fauci. And if you're not a completely credulous person, truth be told, you can't trust this guy one iota. But that is all for now. Like, subscribe, share this video. It's very much appreciated, and take it easy.